Good morning, everyone. We will wait a few more minutes for participants to join before we begin. We can ask participants to keep their microphones mute during the session, please. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you today from Buenos Aires, Argentina, for this webinar called Peace Operation, the Role of UN Conduct and Discipline Service. My name is Cecilia Mazzotta, and I'm part of the research team at RESDAL, and I will be guiding our conversation over the next hour. The webinar will be run in English, but don't worry, we have a simultaneous translation in Spanish. Just click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the Spanish audio channel if you need it. We want to thank the UN Conduct and Discipline Service for joining us and accepting this proposal. So our hope is that today's session will be more than just presentations. We would like to be a real exchange where speakers and participants can share their experience, identify challenges, and reflect together on the new path for action in the future. For those who are new to our audience, let me give you a little bit of context. This is the third webinar of the year in our series called Intercontinental Dialogue from the Global South. The series connects voices from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the MENA region to talk about the role of women in peace operation, with a special focus on preventing sexual harassment and abuse in the security and defense sectors. This initiative is part of a project that RESDAL is carrying out with the support of Global Affairs of Canada, looking at how national legislation addresses sexual harassment and abuse in the military and security institutions, and it is based on the idea that what is tolerated at home often continues in operations abroad. So today we will hear about the work of UN Conduct and Discipline Service in preventing and responding sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping mission, and we'll also listen representatives from troop and police contributing countries who will share their national experiences. I'm sure that their perspectives will bring us a valuable lessons from across the Global South. So before we begin, I would like to make just a quick reminder. If you have any question or comments during the discussion, please write them down in the chat and we collect them and bring them together into the question and answer session at the end. Thank you for all being here today. Well, now it's our pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We are honored to welcome Ms. Beth Asher and Magdalena Bus, who are from Conduct and Discipline Service of the United Nations Secretariat. They will talk about their role of their department plays when a report of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment is made in peacekeeping operation. Ms. Beth Asher has over 20 years of experience with the United Nations. She first worked with the UN mission in Kosovo as legal officer to the chief international prosecutor, and later joined UN headquarters in New York to work with the Conduct and Discipline Service. Today, as Senior Program Officer, she gives guidance on how to follow UN standards of conduct, including preventing sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. She works closely with peacekeeping mission and with troop and police contributing countries to strengthen their partnership with the UN. Before joining the UN, Ms. Asher worked as a lawyer in Canada. She also has hold a master's degree in international human rights and humanitarian law from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute in Sweden. On the other hand, Ms. Magdalena Bus is Program Management Officer of the Conduct and Discipline Service. She has more than 10 years of experience within the United Nations, both in field mission and at UN headquarters in New York. Since 2020, she has worked on different initiatives, including risk management, training, and victim assistance. Ms. Woods also manages the Trust Fund in support victims of sexual exploitation and abuse, making sure it's implemented effectively. Well, ladies, welcome. We are very glad to have you with us today, and I will pass the word to you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, and thank you to RESDAL for this wonderful invitation. I'm very excited to be here with my colleague Magda to have the chance to engage in this dialogue with our colleagues from the troop contributing countries and together to learn a little bit more of how we can strengthen our work. Buenos dias a todos. We're going to go ahead in English. Magda and I will present together, and we won't waste any time to talk about what we do, because that is exactly what we're going to present. So let's start, and we really look forward to your input, your suggestions, and your comments. So we're here to talk about our work in the Conduct and Discipline Service. So we want to start with what is the expectation of the United Nations, peacekeeping around conduct and discipline. Where does it come from? Why is it important? It starts with the United Nations Charter. It is our foundation, and it speaks about UN personnel behaving with the highest standards of integrity. So that is where we start to develop our standards of conduct. And it's very important to note that they apply to all of us. They apply to civilians, they apply to police, to military, volunteers, contractors. We are all expected to follow the same standards. So can we go to the next slide, please? A very brief word of what do we mean when we talk about misconduct. We have quite a few documents that spell out some of the types of misconduct that we mean, but we talk about an act or an omission that violates our standards. It can be our standards, it can be mission-specific rules, it can be obligations to comply with local laws where people are deployed. And when we speak about the type of misconduct that is within the authority of the United Nations to deal with, together with troop contributing countries, it is when the impact is outside of the national contingent. What do we mean when we speak about sexual abuse and sexual exploitation? These are, among our highest priority type of misconduct. And sexual abuse, which you may have already heard about in a previous webinar series, is the actual or threatened physical intrusion of a sexual nature. And what's very important to keep in mind is that for us, any sexual contact with a person under the age of 18 is considered sexual abuse in all cases. We consider that it's not possible for somebody under the age of 18 to consent to any sexual activity. Sexual exploitation is a type of abuse of one's position of power and the imbalance of power with a member of the community who is in a more vulnerable position, often in exchange for something. It can be a transactional exchange with money or food or a promise of employment with an adult, and we consider that sexual exploitation. So let's carry on. Why is it important? I think we all understand this, but this is really what drives our work on a daily basis. Sexual exploitation and abuse in particular, it harms people we are there to serve and protect. It undermines the trust that we build and that we must have with the communities we serve. It harms children who are born of those acts and very often live a very stigmatized life without support from their fathers and without the chance to have a family in that sense. It violates international laws, human rights laws. It fosters a climate of impunity. Obviously, it also impacts the mandate delivery of the United Nations and our reputation as an organization that is there to help. Sexual harassment, which can be part of sexual exploitation and abuse, it can also be something that impacts us within our own personnel, also brings about an immense amount of harm to individuals and also to our ability to work in a respectful work environment. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what does it mean specifically for police and military, our uniformed personnel in the field? And what do they understand of it when they come to join the United Nations? This is an excerpt from something called We Are the UN Peacekeeping Personnel, and it is part of the Memorandum of Understanding between member states and the United Nations. And so it's essentially part of the contract made with uniformed personnel. And what's important is that it notes that peacekeeping personnel represent the United Nations. They're sent somewhere to help people who are recovering from trauma of a conflict. And as a result, they must be ready to accept special constraints on their lives, their public lives and their private lives. And really, this means that you must respect our rules around sexual exploitation and abuse, as well as sexual harassment. Let's go on.
To address all types of misconduct, in particular SEA, sexual exploitation and abuse, the United Nations has three-pronged strategy, and that is prevention, accountability, and victim assistance. Among the prevention measures that are put in place in the headquarters or in the field missions, very often in partnership with member states, is training, either prior deployment or during the deployment, on the UN standards of conduct, and then as well public outreach to the host population. In terms of accountability, accountability encompasses receiving complaints and then investigating them, and following the investigation, the disciplinary process or bringing accountability towards the acts of misconduct. And then the last element of the strategy is victim assistance, which focuses on providing immediate or long-term support to victims of SCA. This can be done with support of the trust fund in support of victims of sexual exploitation and abuse, but also focuses on facilitation of pending paternity and child support claims. Overall, in terms of the conduct and discipline functions, the overall responsibility for that function in the Global Secretariat lies with USG of Department of Management, Strategy, Policy and Compliance. The Conduct and Discipline Service works on all matters related to upholding the UN standards of conduct. We work very closely with various departments and colleagues across the entire Secretariat in the field and in the headquarters. Just to mention a few, we work very closely with DPO and DPPA on conduct and discipline matters, as well as on SCE matters with the Office of the Special Coordinator on improving the UN response to sexual exploitation and abuse, and Office of Victims' Rights Advocate. The Conduct and Discipline Service, in which Beth and I work, is responsible for providing advice to senior leadership on matters related to all forms of misconduct. We also formulate or provide input to conduct and discipline matters to policies and guidance. We also engage very closely with troops and police contributing countries. Among other activities that we do within the Conduct and Discipline Service is also managing the trust funds, as I mentioned, facilitating, working with member states on facilitation paternity claims, as well as developing various trainings and guidance for misconduct risk management. In peacekeeping and special political missions, the conduct and discipline function is performed by conduct and discipline teams, CDTs, as we tend to call them, and they advise heads of missions on conduct and discipline matters. They also manage cases of misconduct, including assessing allegations and referring them for investigation. CDT also leads on misconduct risk management. They provide training and engage with local communities. CDTs also coordinate assistance for victims with senior victims' rights officers where they are present.
Let me say something about risk management and why that's important to us. We really see and accept that whenever we deploy, we will always have risks that small numbers, really very small numbers of individuals amongst very courageous and decent staff and personnel who serve with us, but small numbers will likely commit misconduct. So it is a risk we live with, and it is a part of our work to understand and manage that risk. And what you see here is a depiction of our methodology for dealing with that. Assessing the context in which we deploy, understanding the risk factors that arise, then deciding how we're going to treat or mitigate them, monitoring that to make sure it's being effective, and making adjustments whenever we need to. And that is not something only done by the conduct and discipline personnel. It is an integrated effort. It needs the work of the police for the component, the military component, all other components, other UN family members in the country. It has to be an integrated approach. And we use a toolkit that sets out the methodology and very clear tools to develop a risk register and work plan. It's been made available also to member states. And at the bottom, you will see it is available also on our website. So it's a publicly accessible tool if you're interested in learning more about it. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just a word about member state contributions. We have been talking about troop and police contributing countries, and we want to just say a word about the types of contributions that member states make. Member states deploy personnel as part of military contingents. That's guided by a memorandum of understanding between the UN and troop contributing countries. And member states deploy personnel also as what we call experts on mission. Those are individually deployed UN police officers, members of formed police units, military staff officers, and military observers. So those are the two types of categories of personnel that member states contribute to peace operations. Let's go to the next slide, please. How does our partnership with member state work? Because as Magda mentioned, we are very much engaged with our troop and police contributing countries, and this is something that will only work if we do it together. This is a partnership, and we wanted to try to illustrate how that partnership works in prevention. For example, on our side, we work to develop core training material on conduct and discipline, and the troop and police contributing countries will deliver that in the pre-deployment phase before they deploy their personnel. We have developed specialized training material for commanders, and that will also be delivered by the member states. We deliver induction training in peace operations, often working with the contingents and the specialized trainers that they send to the field. We also screen and vet candidates against the history of any past misconduct, because we don't want those who have committed misconduct in previous deployments to be redeployed. And we partner with member states who provide the names of the personnel that they're going to be deployed, and who also certify that the personnel they deploy did not engage in any misconduct in prior assignments. Let's look at another part of the partnership around accountability. So these are just examples of some of the things that we do and that member states do together to hold personnel accountable when there's an allegation. So for example, we in our office will notify troop contributing countries when we have a prima facie case of misconduct that involves a member of a contingent. And we will request that the investigation be conducted by the troop contributing country in the case of military contingent members. And the member state will, upon receiving our request, appoint a national investigation officer to investigate military contingent members. We will request information about any sanctions if the allegation is substantiated, and the member state in turn will ensure that appropriate disciplinary or criminal sanctions are taken when there is a substantiated allegation, and they will inform the UN of those results. So really, this is another example of the partnership that we have.
Another example of partnership, the partnership also goes towards victim assistance, the last part of our three-pronged strategy. Also in this area of work, we as UN, we refer victims for immediate or long-term assistance, either medical or legal or psychological support for victims. So we also, as CDS, manage trust fund in support of victims of SEA. But then at the same time, it is the member states that contribute to the trust fund and allow us to support those victims through their contributions. At the same time, we as CDS, we facilitate resolution of paternity and child support claims. That is not possible without partnership with member states who appoint focal points to address paternity and child support, and who facilitate resolution of paternity and child support claims as well. Speaking about the trust fund itself has been established by the Secretary General in 2016 to support services to victims of sexual exploitation and abuse by UN personnel. It is a system-wide mechanism that is operating based on voluntary contributions from member states. Until today, 25 member states have kindly contributed to the trust fund. The trust fund also relies on payments withheld or recovered from personnel against whom sexual exploitation and abuse allegations have been substantiated. The trust fund provides funds to address gaps in services for victims by providing grants or funds to NGOs and UN entities, peacekeeping missions to provide the medical, psychological, or legal support, or any other forms of support. Those are just few examples. Until now, Trust Fund has provided funding for projects or initiatives in Haiti, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Guatemala. But as I mentioned, it is a system-wide mechanism, so everywhere where there is a need, the project can be implemented.
So, what are some of the challenges we face working together with member states? And just again, to go through them in these three main areas of our work. In prevention, some of the challenges are personnel properly trained on our standards of conduct and on the unique context of peacekeeping, which is maybe different from any other type of environment where they have worked professionally. Are commanders prepared to lead on conduct and discipline? Again, leading on conduct and discipline in a UN peace operation where there is normally a civilian head of mission is different from leading on it within the national context. In terms of accountability, are investigations done in a timely manner? Are they complete? Does the Secretariat receive information about what happened? What sanction was taken, if any? What accountability measures have taken place? Support to victims is a huge challenge for us because it is difficult to ensure sufficient and sustained support for victims to receive the assistance based on their own needs, their own wishes. There is simply no pot of money that has been identified to create that sustainable solution. And finally, huge challenges in paternity and child support claims, where children are born out of relationships, where children are born out of sexual exploitation and abuse. It is extremely complex to establish or to disestablish paternity, to secure child support payments, and in some cases seek the nationality for the child where that's allowed under the law. You have two different countries. You have very often in the country in which the person was serving and the child's born, you may have a justice system, courts that are weak, that may not be functioning. It's not easy to get documents. It's not easy to get court orders. The languages are different. They need to be translated. There are a lot of complexities. These are huge challenges we face. So finally, Just wanted to make everyone aware of our website, which is called Conduct in UN Field Missions. You have the address at the bottom of your screen. It has a fair bit of information about our work, and in particular, you might be interested in the data that's available on our website. We have quite a lot of data, particularly around sexual exploitation and abuse. It's updated in near real time, and you can search through a number of different fields, looking at different missions, looking at countries, categories of personnel. You can look for more detail on pending paternity claims, and you see on the right side of the slide some of the type of information that you can pull up. So we encourage you to review the website, to review the data, and to keep yourselves updated. And we're going to stop there because we know we have other colleagues to speak, but we thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Beth and Magdalena, thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Now it's our pleasure to introduce Commander Alice Ntondison of the Cameroonian Navy. Commander Song currently serves as Deputy Director of the Military Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Defense of Cameroon, and she is a trainer at the National Training Center for Peacekeeping Operations. She brings wide experience in military cooperation and peacekeeping operations. Early in her career, she worked at the Ministry of Defense, where she helped within the defense agreements and supported Cameroon military missions abroad. From 2017 to 2019, Commander Song was deployed as military observer with MINUSCA. In that role, she monitored security and humanitarian development, supported dialogue among local communities, and ensured compliance with peace agreements. She also served as gender focal point and gender advisor at the Ministry of Defense, and she is the ministry focal point for the LC initiative, which promotes the participation of women in peace operations. And in addition, Commander Song has represented Cameroon as an expert in many international defense and security forums and negotiations of bilateral defense agreements with countries such as Germany, Algeria, Italy, and Egypt. Commander Song, it's a true pleasure to have you with us today. Please, I pass you the word. Yes.
Okay, good afternoon.
Commander Song, welcome. Good afternoon for you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I would like first of all to thank RESDAL for associating us with this discussion and permit us to share Cameroon's experience in managing cases of sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment and sexual harassment. Okay, I am Navy Commander, as she said, Alice Ntondison, Deputy Director of Military Cooperation in Cameroon, and actually working as the gender focal point for the Ministry of Defense and the advisor of the Minister concerning gender matters. As you know, all of you, the Cameroonian Defense Forces are faced with numerous internal security threats, challenges. In the northern regions, we are fighting the Boko Haram terrorist group. In the northwest and southern regions of Cameroon, there are challenges with secessionist groups and armed robbery in the coastal areas. These forces are also involved in the United Nations peacekeeping operations, notably within MINUSCA in Central African Republic and the MONUSCO in the DRC. Within MINUSCA, Cameroon currently has one formed police unit, one infantry battalion, staff officers, and military observers. In Congo, the country has military observers and staff officers. In these various theaters of operations, cases of sexual exploitation and abuse, and sometimes sexual harassment are frequently reported. These cases are sometimes reported in barracks, units, and on theaters of operations. We will not go into the definition of each of these forms of misconduct because my predecessors, Beth, Asha, and Madeleine, did it very well. These acts of misconduct are serious offenses that not only tarnish the image and the reputation of the perpetrator, but also the image, but also that of the defense forces of the country and the country as well. So for all these cases of misconduct, the military leadership prescribe and enforce a zero-tolerance policy, and strong measures are taken against the perpetrators. It should be noted that the outset of the command action is not only repressive. Particularly, emphasis is laid on prevention in order to prevent or at least restrict the occurrence of such cases. Prevention is achieved through awareness campaigns and training. Training modules on such misconduct are delivered in all military and gendarmerie schools and training centers, as well as in pre-deployment training centers. Awareness campaigns target both personnel and commanders at various levels of the hierarchy, emphasizing their responsibility not only as role models, but also in monitoring and controlling the proper conduct and discipline of the units. So let's talk about the management of cases of sexual harassment and abuse of personnel in UN peacekeeping mission. It is important to know that the country has appointed a senior national investigator officer and a team of investigators to handle all cases of sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment within the Cameroonian Defense Forces. So when the United Nations notifies the country of a case of sexual exploitation or abuse or harassment involving one of its personnel, the SNIO means the Senior National Investigator Officer, immediately take over the case. Very often, a multidisciplinary team of experts travels to the location where the offense was committed to conduct investigations. They meet with the UN conduct and discipline officials beforehand. And if there is sufficient evidence, the person is immediately brought before a military tribunal for a military court for disciplinary actions, and sanctions range from disciplinary to criminal sanctions. In case of a pregnancy or birth of a child, samples are taken for paternity testing. If the test is positive, part of the individual's salary is withheld to cover the cost of raising the child. The United Nations is kept always informed throughout the process, and the results of investigation are forwarded to them, as well as the sanction imposed on the offenders. So the following measures were taken against Cameroon military personnel suspected of committing acts of sexual assault: disciplinary sanctions, prosecution before the Yaoundé military court. The Yaoundé military court is the only one in the country which is responsible of those cases, and pecuniary penalty against 2 non-commissioned officers for the care of children born as a result of sexual assault. Allegation of sexual exploitation and abuse against Cameroonian personnel deployed to MINUSCA has triggered several visits by UN delegations. The most recent being that of Mr. Christian Sanders, United Nations Under-Secretary General and Special Coordinator for improving the UN response to sexual exploitation and abuse in July 2025, in last July. The purpose of his visit was to assess the Cameroonian government's response in the fight against sexual exploitation and abuse. The same zero tolerance policy is applied to the same misconduct internally. However, unlike cases of sexual misconduct committed during UN operations, which are recorded and documented, statistics for similar incidents in internal operations are scarce. The recorded figures do not reflect the reality on the field, probably because of the ignorance and fear. Indeed, the victims are often unaware of available remedies, believing that soldiers operate with impunity and they do not report these cases, these incidents for fear of reprisals. Also, according to some victims interviewed, complaining about cases committed by soldiers to other soldiers is pointless, as the latter will cover for their comrades or will not believe the real victim. Efforts are being made to encourage people to testify and report cases of sexual misconduct committed by the defense forces in order to break the taboo of impunity and deter potential offenders. The regions of Cameroon most affected by this phenomenon are the Far North region, the East region, Northwest and Southwest region. In fact, there are those regions where we are facing internal security challenges. Okay, cases of harassment remain difficult to prove because of often lack of evidence from the complainants. However, when evidence exists, the perpetrators are first reprimanded by their superiors, followed by administrative and disciplinary measures to preserve the working environment, and protect the complainants. Given that cases of sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment and sexual harassment are rarely reported internally, likely because the structure responsible for receiving complaints are military, discussions are underway to establish a toll-free hotline. A toll-free hotline for online and more anonymous complaints. Another option would be to integrate and train civilian personnel within the Ministry of Defense in managing cases of sexual exploitation, harassment, and sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment and gender-based violence more broadly. These are, of course, options that are currently under consideration. So to conclude my speech, my presentation, I can say that significant efforts are already being made to combat sexual misconduct between Cameroon military. Within the Cameroon military, these efforts are already bearing fruit, but much remains to be done. The will and determination of the military leadership, combined with that of the personnel, will undoubtedly allow us to meet this challenge. So thank you for your kind attention, and I remain available to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your detailed presentation, Commander. We now move to our final speaker of the day. But before, we kindly remind you that any question or comments can be written in the chat box. In just a few minutes, we will begin with question and answer sessions, and will address what you have shared. Just a minute. Okay. Okay, now it's our pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Colonel El Amira Randa Mansour. Lieutenant Colonel Mansour is an international UN trainer and instructor and represents the Egyptian Army Forces at the liaison agency with the international organization, LAUIO, within the Ministry of Defense of Egypt. She brings extensive field experience with the United Nations, having served as military observer and later as chief of DDR with MINUSCA and in the Central African Republic. She is also certified international UN trainer, specializing in peacekeeping operations, DDR, women, peace and security, and the protection of civilians. Lieutenant Colonel Mansour, it's an honor to have you with us today. So the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the warm introduction. It's truly an honor to join this important dialogue today, representing the liaison agency with International Organization of the Egyptian Ministry of Defense. This webinar reflects our shared commitment across the global south to treating professionalism, accountability, and ethical conduct within peacekeeping missions. Today, I will briefly present Egypt's perspective through LAUIO, focus on our training programs, national mechanisms, and lessons learned that support the United Nations effort to prevent and address sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping operations. With that, let me start by outlining the scope of this presentation. The presentation today will follow 5 or 6 main areas: the role of the United Nations and the current challenges on conduct and discipline, the role of nations and institutions, LAUIO's training programs and their impact, lessons learned and best practices, and finally, our support to the United Nations effort and the future commitments. With this roadmap in mind, I will begin with the broader United Nations framework for the conduct and discipline. The United Nations Conduct and Discipline Service, or CDS, is built on 3 key pillars. First, prevention; second, enforcement; and third, remediation for victims and affected communities. In addition, there is mandatory pre-deployment and in-mission training. There is also the zero tolerance policy on sexual exploitation and abuse, along with the rapid response procedures and survivor assistance protocols. It also collaborates with the LC initiative to advance women's participation in peacekeeping. Together, these elements form the core of the United Nations Conduct and Discipline framework. While this UN effort from a strong foundation, the realities on the ground present several persistent challenges. A core aspect of its work is a risk management approach that strengthens trust, cohesion, and mission credibility. On the challenges, we continue to observe the variation in enforcement and accountability system between different troop and policy contributing countries. Another significant difficulty relates to resource limitation that can affect training quality. Beyond that, there are also complex cultural environments and sensitive civilian interactions that increase risks and require careful navigation. We also face delayed investigations and dedicational constraints, which can undermine the confidence in the disciplinary process. Together, these challenges influence how effectively standards are applied in the field. And this exactly where national institutions play a critical and complementary role. At the national level, one of our primary responsibilities is providing both academic and practical pre-deployment training. We also ensure that United Nations conduct and discipline standards are integrated into national curricula and doctrine. Another important role concerns supporting investigations and ensuring accountability for any violations. We also promote ethical behavior and gender-sensitive approach through dedicated training streams. Through this combined effort, national institutions reinforce and strengthen the United Nations overall accountability framework. In Egyptian Armed Forces, disciplinary issues, including SEA, are handled through a clear chain of accountability that involves immediate reporting, formal investigations, and legal procedures under the military justice authority. Egypt maintains a zero-tolerance approach, and all allegations are referred for a transparent review. When a disciplinary issue occurred, whether inside the mission or within an institution, Egypt applied a structured response, rapid reporting to national focal point, coordination with the United Nations Conduct and Discipline team, and parallel national investigation to ensure accountability. Building on this institutional rule, I will now highlight the actual training programs and their measurable impact. Our training begins with the SEA prevention and reporting mechanisms. Then we moved into gender awareness that culture sensitively modules. We complement this with scenario-based exercise, which simulate real operational challenges and SEA risks environments. As a result, we have observed measurable improvement in professionalism and a reduction in misconduct among deploying personnel. From this program, several important lessons and best practices have emerged over time. One key lesson we have learned is that early management with local communities builds trust and reduce misunderstandings. We also found that transparent reporting and strengthened oversight mechanisms increase accountability at all levels. Another constant finding relates to the importance of continuous refresher training during deployment. Most importantly, is a victim-centered approach ensures dignity, safety, and ethical responsibility. Overall, this lesson helped refine policy training and field engagement. These lessons are shaping the way forward and sharpening our future commitment to the United Nations framework. During my deployment with MINUSCA as a chief of DDR and the chief liaison officer, I participated in coordination process related to discipline and conduct, including reporting procedures, community engagement measures, and ensuring adherence to the United Nations supervisor centered approach. Among the national challenges, we are faced culture sensitively during reporting, resource limitation in remote areas, and ensuring consistent communication between headquarters and deployed units also. One key lesson from our national practice in the importance of early reporting, strict documentation, and continuous liaison with the United Nations CDS team to ensure timely action and prevent recurrence. Looking forward, one of our main commitments is aligning national doctrine even more closely with the United Nations standards. We are also investing in advanced training and simulation centers to strengthen capacity building. Furthermore, we aim to deploy more trained female peacekeepers, given their proven impact on SEA prevention and on trust building with local populations. We are also working on strengthening rapid response mechanisms and interagency cooperation. These commitments ensure continued alignment with the United Nations priorities and reinforce Egypt's dedication to global peacekeeping efforts. That brings me to the final point of the presentation of today. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to hearing your reflections and exchange experience with colleagues from across the global house. In closing, treating conduct and discipline is not only a United Nations responsibility, it's a shared duty among all troops, police, contribution country teams. Together, through coordination training, transparent mechanism, and supervisors-centered approach, we can reinforce trust, accountability, and the credibility of peacekeeping missions worldwide. Thank you again for the opportunity to contribute to this important dialogue. This concludes my presentation. Thank you, and I'm happy for taking me any question.
Victoria Colonel, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. Well, now we are going to move into our question and answer sessions. Well, this is the time to share the question with our panelists or any comments and reflection that you would like to do. We have some questions in the chat. I will start reading because it's more easy for me. I have a few questions for Beth and Magdalena. The first is what percentage of trust fund amounts is successfully recovered from perpetrators? And when a perpetrator has already repatriated, what mechanisms are used to recover these funds, either from the individual or from the troop and police contributing country? And the second one is, you have mentioned the challenges within each of three pillars. I think that was commented by Magdalena. Which pillar is currently being the most challenging and in your professional opinion?
Thank you, Cecilia. I can take the question on the trust fund. In terms of the amount, the withheld amounts, initially the amount, the withheld payments were a small portion of what was provided to the trust fund. However, what is important for us, remains an important part of the funding for the trust fund. And until now, since its creation, we withheld $935,000 for substantiated cases. And the way, I think I would like to highlight here is the way that the amounts are withheld is that once the case is substantiated, we then work with the mission and with the member state to withhold the amounts so it doesn't necessarily matter whether the alleged perpetrator or substantiated perpetrator is in the country or no longer there. In many cases, when there is when the case of SCA has been substantiated, or generally in the many cases the perpetrator has been repatriated. But either way, no matter at what stage it is, the amount is withheld with the support with the member states and with the mission. So there are accounting mechanisms to do that. And in terms of the second question, I will let Beth to chime in on that. But I believe that all of the areas of work, all of the elements of the three-pronged strategies have their own unique challenges that require addressing. So it's very difficult to choose one over the other, but I will let Beth to add anything from her side.
Thanks, Magda. Thanks for those questions. I agree. It's hard to choose, not only because they're all very important, but because they're also interconnected. But if I had to choose something, I would say that it's really most challenging where you have a victim who needs help, whether it's a victim who needs help, whether it's a child born of SEA, and that human component of it. In trying to find a solution that meets their needs and their wishes, that is really difficult and challenging. But honestly, it's also important that we have the accountability piece. And of course, in a perfect world, we only want to be working on prevention. So that makes it a difficult question. I hope I've answered it. And I also note that we've been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat. We just haven't been able to answer all of them quickly enough. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Beth. We have more questions. Manshur Rahman is asking, how can peacekeeper build safe, respectful, and professional relationships with community members to prevent opportunity for SEA? We have another one that would like to know what's the UN guidance regarding the filing of criminal complaints in detected cases, because the audience did not fully understand the link between internal investigations and victims' access to justice.
Is that question for us? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is around where an act is also a crime and what happens, right? That's the question, is around criminal accountability, if I understood correctly. So an act of sexual exploitation and abuse for us absolutely is misconduct, but also depending on the act that was committed can also amount to a crime. So surely any sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual abuse of a child, in almost every country in the world, these are crimes. For troop and police contributing countries, they have the jurisdiction to sanction their personnel, and it is up to them. I mean, the UN is not a sovereign state, so we cannot bring a criminal action, but it is up to them to take that criminal action and to report back to us. In the case of a staff member, a civilian staff member who may have committed an act of misconduct that amounts to a crime, the Secretary General can and does refer that matter to the national state, sometimes the host state, for criminal accountability by that country. So that's what happens to seek criminal accountability. And the UN will collaborate, but ultimately it is up to the member state to move that forward. I hope I answered that.
Thank you, Beth. We have more questions for you. One say what are the difference while mentoring the state of CDS? In some document is given prevention, enforcement, and remedial action, while Magdalena said prevention, accountability, and victim assistance. If you can please clarify. We have also what are the screening and and vetting steps are taken to ensure that peacekeepers do not have prior misconduct allegations before their deployment.
Okay, thanks for those. Wow, whoever asked the question about the terminology is very good eye for detail. When we started our work, we did in fact use the terminology of prevention, enforcement, and remedial action. For many years, we used it. And over the last few years, we have been slowly changing to prevention, accountability, and victim assistance, which we felt was really more of a good description of the work we are doing, but sometimes the older terminology comes in. So, I mean, that's the simple explanation for that. Screening and vetting steps. So they can be a little bit different for different categories of personnel, but essentially, we will look in our records of, we maintain a confidential and secure database of cases involving personnel who were deployed in the Secretariat, and we will review our database against names of personnel who will be deployed: civilians, uniformed personnel, military personnel, and police personnel. Obviously, with police and military personnel, we do that in collaboration with the troop or police contributing countries. They provide us with those names, and then we can check against that. We also have a database called ClearCheck, which contains the names of individuals who, against whom there have been substantiated allegations of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, or sexual harassment. It's another part of our screening tool. So that's the way that we do it, and we do it for all categories of personnel.
Okay, thank you a lot, Beth. We have two more questions, if it's okay for you. The last one, Wahid Said is, he says, thank you to the presenters for the informative session. In my country, there remains a noticeable gap between UN standards and national institutional practice. I would like to appreciate my recommendation from the distinguished speakers on we as CSO representative can effectively advocate to integrate the UN misconduct share risk management tool into national training curricula and pre-deployment programs. Many thanks. That is a very interesting question. And the last one from Flor Marroquin, she said, what mechanism or strategies can be applied to strengthen ethical conduct and discipline in the military unit?
I mean, I'm happy to try the first one, and maybe my colleagues in the military might like to address the second one. But I think the question of how CSO representatives can advocate to integrate our risk management approach, I think it's a good question, and we would welcome that advocacy. We have a number of tools, including our risk management tools, as well as special training for commanders that are freely available. And I think that if CSOs have the ability to engage with national training institutions, what they can do is to try to get that type of material and discussion part of the curriculum as early as possible. So even, you know, these are important concepts even for those who may not yet know that they are deploying. And it is a long process of repeating and engaging. And so I would really look for areas of intervention as early as possible in the training life of a member of the military or police would be my suggestion. And I think my other colleagues would be well suited to answer the other question.
Maybe some of the military colleagues would like to answer the question about the mechanism or strategies that can be applied to strengthen the ethical conduct of the military unit, or with some example, for instance. In the case of Cameroon, maybe we have. No? Well, we keep that question in mind, and we are now reaching the time to conclude this event. So I would like to thank Ms. Asher, Ms. Woods, Commander Song, and Lieutenant Colonel Mansour for this valuable knowledge and experiences that they have shared with us today. We hope this session has been useful for all of you and has contributed to our creating an open dialogue. It has been a truly honor for me to serve as a host today in the presence of such distinguished panelists and such engaged audience from across the globe. Well, finally, allow me to say a brief closing words as part of the RESDAL team. First, we are very proud to have participants from so many different regions. Our goal was to offer a clear space for exchange between the UN Conduct and Discipline Service and national institutions to strengthen cooperation and promote accountability and trust in peacekeeping operations. And second, we believe that it's essential to bring together voices from different backgrounds and contexts, and your participation today shows the genuine interest and commitment to work on this important issue. We sincerely thank you all for joining us today. Finally, we invite you to stay connected with us, to subscribe to receive updates on our project supported by Global Affairs Canada, as well as information of the upcoming events. So, well, once again, thank you very much. We look forward to continue this important conversation together. Good afternoon for all, and thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.